Hey friends, welcome back to part 4 of a series of Tinkercad tutorials. Today we're going to cover everything that you need to know about the workplane, the ruler. We're going to touch upon the blocks and the bricks platforms as well. And I'm also want to show you some of the more advanced shapes and what you can do with them. And you can find all those under, if you click this drop down, you see all these different shape generators, circuits, printable kits. We're going to cover some of those towards the end of the video. But let's get to it by starting with the workplane. So I'll try to explain when is the best time to use the workplane. So let's go ahead here and hide this cone with clicking Control H. And if we want to unhide it, we simply click on this light bulb here. Now, what I'm going to do is drag out this icosahedron. I feel like if we're able to spell that, we could probably win a spelling bee. Okay, so when to use a workplane. Now, let's say we wanted to label some of these sides with letters and text. So for instance, let's say I wanted to go into text and numbers, and I wanted to place this B right on this side, so this triangle here, and I want to place the B there. Now, without using the workplane, we would have to probably resize the B, and then we would have to rotate it around. We'd have to move it over, use our keyboard keys. We'd have to raise it up, and then we'd have to go and make a whole lot of orientation changes and rotate it every which way to try to land it on this triangle. Now, there's a much easier way to do this, and that's with the workplane. Now, to access the workplane, we can simply click W, or we could click here. Let's try it with the keyboard shortcut W. And now you'll see this is highlighted. Now what we do, and you could see this blue square kind of going along the workplane. If we hover over the object, we're going to see different options of where to apply it to. So essentially, we're creating a new workplane. Right now, we've just been working on this one plane here, but we can apply the new workplane to any side we wish, which is amazing. So if we want to place a letter B here, we simply click on this triangle, and now if we navigate around, you'll see that there's a workplane that's glued to this side. So now it would be quite simple to drag a B over. We'll uniform resize it by shift clicking, and now we can simply position it using our keyboard. Now, something to keep in mind here as we're repositioning it, this is a good time to refresh our memory about what the snap grid does. So right now, as I'm trying to reposition this B, if I'm trying to get it right in the center, you see it might be tricky because it's jumping quite a bit with every click of the keyboard. However, if we change the snap grid to 0.1, it now moves in much smaller measurements. And this way we could do a better job centering it on this triangle. I like it right here. I feel like it's a good fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click away, and then I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to group them. So now this object is grouped together. Now if I want to go back and work on the original plane, you'll see that we're unable to. So let's say I drag in an eye, it's still being dragged in on this plane. This is because we have to exit the workplane. There's two ways to do it. You can either click on the workplane here, or you can press W again, and all we have to do is click away, and then it gets rid of that additional workplane. So again, to get rid of the workplane, we simply can click on workplane, and we have to click anywhere outside of the actual workplane, and it will remove it. And now we see we are left with this icosahedron, if I recall correctly, and if we move it around, it's one object, and the B is perfectly placed on it. And this is really, really helpful, not only when you're adding and subtracting things, but let's bring our cone back into view, and I'll show you why else it's very important. So let's say we were to take this shape, and let's, for the purpose of what I'm trying to show you, let's move it down a bit. And let's make sure it's overlapping with the cone, which it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to group these two together. So Control G, you can achieve group with Control G. By the way, I have all of these keyboard shortcuts and all of my tutorials. I put them up on the website, promoambitions.com/Tinkercad. And if you navigate down, you will see all the keyboard shortcuts you can handle, and you'll see a bunch of the tutorials here. we're now filming part 4. And that's why it's not up here yet, because we're currently filming it. Okay, so now that this is grouped, we can move it around and see that it's one object. However, if you want to 3D print it, it might not be the best to 3D print because it's hanging off of the side, off of the bottom, and you want it to be on one plane. So let's say we wanted to flatten this object out to be on this plane. So we're trying to remove this bottom piece here. Now, normally what you would do is you would grab maybe a box and then you would try to grab a cube and basically expand it and delete away from here. But that could be tricky to do. A much easier way to do it is we go back to Workplane and we click on here on the bottom, and now we can bring in a box. So we simply bring in a box shape. We can extend it out, drag it out, and now we can simply group all 3 objects together. So again, this cube is a hole and these are solid objects. So one solid object, one hole, and if we group them together, let's try it with Control G this time, you will see that the surface is now perfectly flat. And if you were 3D printing this on a printer that doesn't handle geometric shapes too well and likes to have a flat bottom, this would be very, very helpful because now you could print it and it will come out beautifully and you won't have any issues. Okay, so I hope that addresses some of the concerns with Workplane and how to use it. Again, you see this yellow highlighted Workplane. To exit out of it, we click Workplane and we click away, and now we are back to where we were originally. Now let's cover something else, and I want to get rid of this shape here, so let me ungroup them and ungroup again. Go ahead and delete those shapes because we no longer need them, but we'll leave the cone. Then I'm going to click on the home view. And what I'm going to do now is cover the ruler. Now, the ruler is very, very helpful if you want to adjust the dimensions of a shape or the dimensions of a shape as they relate to one another. And I'll show you what I mean. Let's drag over a roof and bring it right here. So I'm going to go ahead, highlight these two, and I'm going to click F to fit to view. Okay, so I'm going to grab the ruler, and in the beginning, let's just leave it anywhere so you see how a ruler works. So if we leave it anywhere on the plane and we click on an object, we're going to get more detailed representation of the measurements. What's important to note is that we see there's green arrows and there's blue arrows. Now the blue arrows are referring to the dimension attributes of the shape. So if we see here, we see how tall it is, how its length, and its width. And again, if we desire to change it, we can simply change it by inputting whichever numbers we please. You also see the 0 here, and what this is the distance from the plane we're currently working on away from the object. Because the object is touching the plane, it's at 0. However, if we wanted to shift it below the plane, we can click -5, let's say, and now it's below the plane. Or we can click 10 and it will be above the plane. However, let's just leave it at 0. So we left that at 0, and what these green arrows indicate is the measurement away from the origin of the ruler. We're going to define this circle as the origin of the ruler. If you're familiar with geometry, then you know the X, Y, and Z plane. This is the XY plane, and we can refer to this as the origin. The X is to dismiss the ruler, so if we wanted to get rid of the ruler, we simply click X. By the way, the shortcut to bring up the ruler is R. So it's quite simple, ruler, R. You bring it up and you could place it anywhere you want. Now we're going to do a little experiment where we're going to try and see where the corner of this roof, how far away it is from all different dimensions of this cone. And the ruler tool is very helpful in showing the measurements of how far something is away from a shape. So right here, we have it at the corner of the roof. And if we click on the cone, we're going to see that not only does it show us the measurements of the cone as it did before, but it's also showing how far away. So you see the 31.9? It's measuring it to this corner here. And we could see that that's the case because there's another green arrow. It's hidden a little bit through the roof, but we could see it through the roof, 12.7. And it means that this origin, if you go 12.7 millimeters up and then go 31.9 across, you're going to touch this corner here, the corner of the cone. If we wanted to measure the distance between here and this corner rather than this corner, what we could do is we could simply click on the origin again, and it will change which corner it is measuring. So we could see here, it's now measuring the distance to this corner because it's showing 25 across and 12.7 up. And this brings us to this corner here. If we wanted to check the other corner, we would click again and we would see now that it's showing us how far away it is from this corner, the origin from this corner. And the same goes for this corner. If we click once more, we'll see that now it's showing us how to get to this corner. How do we get there? 37.7 millimeters up, 31.9 millimeters across, and we will touch this exact corner. Now, what if we wanted to not measure how far away we are from the corners, but we wanted to measure how far away we are from the midpoints of this object? We can achieve that by clicking this 3 lines encompassed in a circle. If we click it, we will see that we are now dealing with the midpoints. What do I mean by midpoints? Right now it's showing us that if we wanted to see the exact midpoint of this object, we would have to go 44 across, and we would actually have to travel in altitude 16.57 up. And this is the exact midpoint of the object. And finally, to get rid of the ruler, we simply click Dismiss Ruler. And that's it. And that's how you use the ruler tool. Let's now take a look at what the blocks and the bricks platforms are. So I'm not sure in which case you would want to use this. Maybe if you're into Legos, or if you want to see how you would build out your design in blocks, you could simply click blocks and you will see your designs as blocks. So to give you an example, right now it's kind of basic. If you go and use more blocks, you'll get a more detailed version of your design, and you can even make it even more detailed by using more blocks. And now we could kind of see that this resembles a cone, and it shows you if you wanted to build it out using blocks, this is what it would look like. You can click on ground and it will simply remove the ground, and you can check out your objects as blocks. I guess if you're using building blocks for some things, maybe it could be helpful during certain designs, and you can actually change the colors if you wish. So for our roof shape, we can make it ice color, and the other one we can leave it as red. So that's how you use the blocks platform. The bricks platform is more like Lego pieces. So again, it's very rudimentary. It doesn't even resemble our shapes because we're in the very basic version of what we built. However, we can make it much more detailed by using more Lego pieces. For this sake, let's just call them Lego pieces. They refer to them as bricks. So if you wanted to build this out with Lego pieces, this is how you would do it. So we could click layers and we could see exactly what it would take to build out our designs if we were using Lego or brick pieces. And you simply click the arrow keys and it will show you layer by layer how you need to apply the Lego pieces in order to get something that resembles your design. Now, I don't want to say it accurately resembles the design, and this is probably because you're using pretty large Lego pieces. I wish this used more Lego pieces, and that way we can actually build out a much more accurate representation. I wouldn't say if you saw this, you would say, aha, that's a cone. This does not look like a cone to me. But again, it's something that Tinkercad offers, and some people find it useful, otherwise they wouldn't have it. To get back to design, you click these 9 squares, and we're back in our design platform. And now's a good time to mention, if you ever want to see what's new or what Tinkercad is working on, you click on what's new, and it brings you to a description of all the new things that come with each version. So right now we're using Tinkercad 4.4. It was updated December 19th, and this is all the new features that they offer. So let's X out of here and go back to our design. And the one last thing I want to mention in this video is how to manipulate certain shapes. And you're gonna see this manipulation panel that looks a little bit different than some of the other shapes we were manipulating. You'll get this with ring and basic shapes, and you're definitely going to find it in shape generators. Whether you go to all or featured, there are some shape generators where it shows this in the manipulation panel. So I want to just briefly talk about how to go about tweaking this. Now, the red squares, if you drag them out, you are actually manipulating the way this ring, and let me just slide over so you could see it a bit more accurately. So what this ring is it's a shape that revolves around this axis to create this ring. but the pattern of the shape that's revolved around is what we're tweaking. So for instance, if I tweak this out, you'll see that the actual ring, the pattern that's used to revolve and create the ring, is changing. So the red squares is to manipulate the actual path, and it's easier to use than the circles, but I'll cover the circles in a second. So if we were to move this out, we can even make it longer. Let's make this longer as well. So now I want to cover what the circles are. The circles, if you've ever used Photoshop, if you've ever tried a more advanced 3D printing program, you're probably really familiar with it. What this is it dictates the angle at which the pattern continues. Now, this can be quite advanced, so I don't want to cover it in a Tinkercad tutorial, but all I would say is play around with it and you will be able to understand it better. For instance, you see that like this, the circle that's created here, it's a pretty small circle. However, we can expand it out, and now if we were to draw a circle from it, it will be much bigger. So it's basically dictating the angle at which the paths start to change. And again, it's much better to just play around with it, and it'll be easier to figure it out. If you want, you can try to see how it's manipulated on other programs, Fusion 360 for example, or if you have access to Photoshop. It's rarely that you need to use these, but I wanted to cover it because they are prominent in this program and you should be able to know how to access it. So right now we created something that resembles a boomerang, and just to adequately explain, I'm going to go back to basic shapes and I'm going to cut this in half and show you what it looks like. So let me group this together. Let me go to group. Now, if we go over here and we look at this shape, and let me actually press F to zoom in on the shape. If you see this here, this resembles exactly what we built out in our manipulation panel. So if you remember, it looked like a boomerang, and now it actually looks like a boomerang. So if we left it whole, it would just be a ring with this boomerang revolving around this axis all the way around. So it's using the pattern of the boomerang revolving all around the axis, and that's how these types of shapes work when you're able to manipulate those designs. I hope this helped answer some of the questions. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share it. Share it with some other people that are trying to learn Tinkercad. Feel free to share with your school. I'm trying to basically create something that's of use to people and that's helpful, because when I started out with Tinkercad, I learned the same exact way. I went to YouTube and I basically watched all the tutorials I could, and now that some of them are outdated, I wanted to update the tutorials and hopefully they're of use to you. So we covered this. In the next video, we're gonna cover some of the more advanced things like circular patterns, rectangular patterns, and then later on, I'm gonna get into importing, exporting, sending to, and all the different ways that you can download your designs and how you can use them. Hope you found it useful. Thank you for tolerating yet another long video. I appreciate you guys watching, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the day or evening, depending on where you are. Catch you at the next tutorial.